My guest tonight is Daniel Spaulding. Daniel earned a BA in English Literature from Bridgewater State University. He currently works and lives in Seoul, South Korea, where he began contributing to several online projects, including Soul of the East and Alternative Right. His writings focus on foreign policy, politics, philosophy, Eastern and Western culture. Dan, how are you doing tonight, or this morning?
I'm good. How are you, Tim?
Very well. Thank you for coming on the show.
Thank you for having me.
And, I think when I emailed you last week, you asked for what specific you want to talk about, and I guess what I wanted to talk about is sort of the liberal insanity that appears to have reached critical mass here in the West. An example is this push towards LGBT rights and its apparent corporate backing. Doesn't seem to be a spontaneous movement. This is consistent with the Anglosphere, the Anglo-American empire, using human rights to undermine traditional societies abroad. Basically, I want to talk about destabilization at home and abroad, courtesy of the New World Order. Interview part 2.
And I think that's arguably, generally speaking, man's weakest point is his sexual nature. Mm-hmm. It's something always with us, so that's a very easy thing to attack and get people to essentially succumb to their lusts and to their physical and sexual desires. It doesn't take a lot of convincing, I think, to get people inclined down that path.
Mm-hmm. And you can really do damage to society by upsetting traditional roles. A good example is what's occurred here in the United States, where if you set in motion certain trends, which be it feminism or sexual revolution, permissive attitudes, you can undermine the family. And if you undermine the family, that causes ripple effects throughout society. One thing is it makes children far more vulnerable to abuse, crime. It really causes a division between the sexes because men are effectively cuckolded. That's happened in many communities, particularly the black community, via the courtesy of the welfare state. But you still have the sexual energy, you still have masculinity to contend with, so it manifests itself in high crime rates.
Yeah.
But it's almost like if you look at it broadly speaking, it's almost like a plan has unfolded to do this in the West.
Yeah.
Because if you look at feminism, sexual revolution was a top-down revolution. And feminism was created by the foundations and intelligence agencies. In fact, Gloria Steinem.
Yeah, she openly admits that she worked with the CIA.
Yeah. And Ms. Magazine was funded by Katharine Graham and the Washington Post, and a bunch of billionaires funded the magazine.
Yeah.
And
I think it's even in the case of what we've seen in the last decade, this kind of what seems to have just come out of nowhere, this push for so-called gay marriage, and how did that come about? Because looking back 10 years, as far as I can recall, nobody was even really talking about it, and then all of a sudden, a few years ago, it just became the issue. And I think it was Joe Biden who shed a little light on that inadvertently when he praised the Hollywood Jewish community for using television sitcoms to push for so-called gay marriage.
Television, yes.
Yeah.
The ultimate psychological warfare weapon.
Yeah. So
that's true. He did. He credited Jews. Now, if you were to blame Jews for gay marriage, you would be called an anti-Semite.
Yeah. But I think even in his case, he came under a little heat because there
was an article in Cocoon magazine by Amy Dean saying that very thing in Cocoon magazine. So they make that claim, just like if you read Neil Gable or Empire of Our Own, or was it Joel Stein in L.A. Times who said that Hollywood is controlled by Jews and we're proud of it. Yeah. So if you can take credit for Hollywood if you're Jewish, but you can't take the responsibility for it if someone is critical of Hollywood's product.
Yeah, you can praise. You can praise the overrepresentation of Jews in Hollywood, but you can't criticize it.
Yeah. So, but then that's true. Then they have if they're overrepresented and they control it, then they are certainly responsible for what Hollywood produces.
Oh yeah, the message is theirs. I mean, so you can't blame the Mormons for it or something. Yeah.
So, But yeah, that's one of the things. It's well, it seemed to come out of nowhere, but it's promoted as an agenda. Of course, it was also promoted by the courts. It wasn't like this came through popular vote.
No, yeah, it was not in any way organic or from the bottom up.
Yeah.
It was completely imposed. Psychologically, it was imposed via this television, sitcoms, all that. And then legally, it was imposed by the courts and the bureaucrats from the top down.
Yeah, how was it, this strange interpretation of the 14th Amendment?
Yeah,
what?
Yeah. And it was decided before. I mean, the legal arguments, that's just, that's just the wrapping they put on it. But, And when this is where you really understand that there's an agenda, there's a conspiracy, if you will, to impose these things. Because the moment you have this gay marriage issue, it gets the full corporate and governmental backing all simultaneously. Yeah.
Okay, you're going to tell me all the separate boardrooms, whether it's Nike or Google or the
Facebook,
NFL threatened to pull the Super Bowl out of Georgia if they passed the Marriage Protection Act.
Yeah.
Now this is when you hear this, and you realize just how weaponized entertainment is.
Yeah.
Okay? Because if all those good Christians out there who love their football on Sunday, and who believed in the sanctity of traditional marriage, if they really, really believed in their religion, they'd boycott the NFL.
Yeah.
No.
But and it's interesting because it shows. The NFL, as you just pointed out, what's the majority of their audience? It's the good old white Christian guy who after church on Sunday sits down for the game. But yet the people who are, on a managerial level running the NFL have nothing but contempt for their audience by throwing that stuff in their face and making it all about these social issues, which I would think have absolutely nothing to do with football.
Well, we all know NFL is a psyop. Just watch any Super Bowl halftime show, right?
Yeah, all the commercials. Yeah, so it's definitely. Yeah. I mean, at the very least, something like the NFL is the bread and circuses for the masses.
Well, professional sports in general.
Yes, but there's certainly a lot more. I mean, that's just on a surface level, and then once you take a second look, there's a lot more sinister things going on behind it.
Yeah. It's also more fixed than people care to believe.
Yeah, but I mean, coming back to what you mentioned about the corporations, I recall when the Supreme Court passed or legalized or whatever the correct term is, so-called gay marriage. All of these corporations, Google, Facebook, you name it, Apple, they already had their logos ready to go. I mean, they knew this was coming. It wasn't spontaneous. I mean, they knew what the decision was going to be beforehand. They had all the agitprop prepared, ready to go. And once the word came out, the rainbow flags went up, and coming back to like the colored revolutions where they have all the ready-made flags and all the ready-made props ready to go, but we're supposed to think of it as this kind of organic uprising. It's the same situation. And on the other hand, on the what was it? That church shooting in Charleston, South Carolina. What was it, last year?
Yeah, last summer.
Roof, right?
Dylan
Storm Roof. What was the three named mass shooter?
Yeah.
With how they quickly turned that into this cultural jihad against the Confederate flag.
Yep.
And I can't help but think that was ready to go too. Like these kind of things, they have it there ready, and either they'll make set it off the situation, or they're just waiting for the right opportunity to happen where they can set it off and push these things from the top down. They're not organic. They're not the power of the people or anything like that. It's the elites pushing things, shoving things down.
Mm-hmm. The same thing occurred just recently with, it's occurring now with North Carolina, where this LGBT bathroom law or something, breaks you. Yeah. And then, tell me this isn't a conspiracy, because the city of Charlotte passes one of these stupid tolerance laws,
Yeah.
You think about it for 5 minutes, you realize what the problem is with it. You can't
Yeah.
identify. It's not your gender. It's not your sex. It's what gender you identify with in any
Yeah.
given day. Well, that's great. Okay.
Yeah.
So then North Carolina passes a law overriding the state law, saying no, we're going to revert to the traditional understanding. You know, it's what you're born with. Okay.
Yeah.
That's what makes sense.
Yeah.
All of a sudden, the whole New World Order comes down on North Carolina.
Yeah.
You know, it's PayPal, it's Bruce Springsteen.
But I think they dodged a bullet there. I mean, if you can keep Bruce Springsteen out, you're doing something right.
So, but I'm thinking, so this you're going to tell me this isn't coordinated? That's
No, definitely. Again, it's the same and this is where I kind of would have to take a jab at, for instance, the libertarians who think it's all the state, and that the free market will save us from this. Well, it's the corporations, it's Apple, it's Microsoft, it's PayPal, it's Facebook, it's Zuckerberg. All of these guys are pushing and pushing and pushing this stuff. It's not just Obama. I mean, Obama and the Democrats get a lot of flack, and rightfully so, but they are almost frontmen. They're not the money. They don't have the money to push this stuff. They don't have, it's these corporations who are the ones who sponsor politicians, who give them the money for their campaigns. I mean, if all of these corporations said, we're not interested in pushing this social subversion and nonsense, and we're not going to give money to politicians who do, this stuff would disappear overnight. So certainly the corporations and the so-called, free market and capitalism, these kind of things have to be included in a serious understanding and critique of this, of what's going on.
Yeah, these causes, and one thing, whether it's the emergence of feminism in the late 20th century, mid to late 20th century, gay rights, these weren't spontaneous, because one of the big I guess, an impetus for this was the Kinsey Report.
Yeah.
And that was funded by the Rockefeller Foundation and Ford Foundation, and he was promoted by Time, Life, and despite the fact that his methodology was completely flawed, he was a scientific fraud and also a criminal,
Yeah.
a pedophile.
Well, so was Wilhelm Reich, but
yeah,
he's kind of
so it's being promoted. Again, that's another example of supposedly these avant-garde radicals.
Yeah.
The entire corporate establishment is promoting them.
Yeah. I mean, they're not just guys doing research in isolation.
Mm-hmm.
I mean, if they were, you'd never hear about them. Mm-hmm. And whatever it is that they're peddling would fall into complete irrelevance. But they're picked up by the foundations, by the corporations, by the media, and even when the media kind of presents itself as critical or neutral, that's, again, half the time that's a veneer just to sort of bring these people out into the open and put these ideas out into the public. And
are you familiar with Aaron Russo?
Yes. He was a libertarian guy of some sort, wasn't he?
Yeah, he got freedom to fascism.
Yeah.
Now, Alex Jones did an interesting talk with him. Must have been 16, maybe 10. No, sorry, maybe 10 years ago. And they talked about 9/11 and his discussions with Nicholas Rockefeller.
Yeah.
And one of the things was Nicholas Rockefeller revealing to him what was going to happen the following year. I think it was like his conversation was supposedly done in the spring of 2000. Mm-hmm. And Nicholas Rockefeller told him that next year there's going to be this event and they're going to be hunting for terrorists in caves. And they also revealed to him that, asked him what was feminism. And feminism, Aaron Russo said, typical thing, it's about women's rights and liberation and freedom, all that. I said, no, you idiot. It's to destroy the family. They get women to pay taxes, to become wage slaves, and weaken the family.
Yeah.
Of course, that's borne out, of course, what we mentioned regarding Gloria Steinem, how she was part of Congress of Cultural Freedom, which has published all these front magazines to control.
And you can quite actually just go to YouTube and type in her name and CIA, and there's an actual clip of her admitting that she was sponsored by the CIA.
She also dated Henry Kissinger and
So this is not a woman for the people. I mean, establishment connected. And you'll notice a lot of these feminists are upper middle class or upper class. They're not working class or lower class people, but they're these upper and upper middle class people who can afford this kind of lifestyle, this the free, sexual freedom, and they have the money and all this. And on the other hand, they push their so-called values downward onto the lower classes and the working class, and it's been completely destructive for them.
Yeah, Jay Dyer had an interesting talk. He was on Hoaxbusters Call recently with Jamie Hanshaw.
Yeah.
They were talking about some of these TV shows like Real Housewives of New Jersey and some of these aspirational, reality shows where they show these rich people just living these outrageously, opulent lifestyles, but they're it's stab in the back. There's a lot of messaging there. One thing it's the one thing I think is to turn people into narcissists and psychopaths. Another thing is to demoralize them because they're watching these people live lifestyles which hardly anyone can afford.
Yeah, they can't afford it. They can't emulate it, and they're just kind of left, in the wind. But all of this stuff, for instance, putting women in the workforce, no-fault divorce, the sexual revolution, all that stuff, the negative outcomes of it have hit the working class, have hit the lower classes, and even the lower middle class have, demolished them. But, if you're the type of person who can afford to go to, the cocktail parties in New York and Washington, it's good for you. You can go hook up with this person or that person. You don't have to, you can get the divorce and get a big, alimony settlement, et cetera, et cetera. It doesn't really affect them. It doesn't cost them anything.
Yeah.
But on the lower, those on the lower end of the social spectrum, on the economic spectrum, it's been disastrous for them. And it's sad because now you have entities, supposedly conservative entities like the National Review, who now use this complete destruction of the working class and the lower classes to actually say that they deserve to die. They should die off. The white working class should die off. They're just a bunch of drug-addled, broken family, sexual degenerates. They should all just die. That's what the National Review has been pushing. Another CIA-funded entity. But, this is the world that they're creating.
Yeah. And another magazine I always thought was probably CIA was Playboy.
Probably.
You look at the story where Hugh Hefner gets the pictures of Marilyn Monroe just before she becomes a nationwide sensation.
Yeah.
And what's that promoting? What did that do to people's, this glossy view of sex, this idea of what was masculine. Prior to that, the idea of masculine was a man going out supporting his family. Yeah. After Playboy, it's a man, it's a womanizer, it's a cad.
Yeah. Well, again, all of that stuff, pornography, again, if you look who runs the pornography industry, it's the same people Joe Biden was praising for and again, I'm not saying this in any kind of even moral sense. It's just an objective analysis. Who predominates these industries and what are their agendas?
Moral subversion.
Yeah. I can't come to any other conclusion.
No. It's, it's like saying, it's whether it's pornography or the comedy or even like Jewish humor, right? It's subversive. It's, Woody Allen and
Sarah, and then you have these more modern ones like Sarah Silverman and what's her name, Amy Schumer, and
now it's Woody Allen was clever. They're just
you see, now it's just gross, crude, still rabidly anti-Christian, anti-white, just bashing men. It's just nasty and vicious. Even even the kind of milder, snarky sort like you get with Jon Stewart, which is still essentially the same thing, this kind of cynical, mean-spirited so-called humor.
Mm-hmm. Yes. But again, I think that goes back to the authoritarian personality.
Yeah.
Which you undermine male authority, Christian values, and you weaken the host society. And in a weakened host society, this alienated or minority feels stronger.
Yeah. And
so.
and they feel less less as of the outsider.
And of course, and the trick is the sense of victimization that they capitalize on, what they've internalized. It makes them incapable of course, we're speaking in broad generalities here. We're speaking as the Jewish, as an entity, as a group. It makes them incapable of meaningful introspection.
Yeah.
And which is a bad trait to have, for anybody to have. But again, what's happened is, because of the 20th century, and you could say World War II, the Holocaust narrative, and that's a complex event in and of itself.
Yeah.
I think it's subject to more, a much more, I think it's a...
It hasn't
much
got
more
the scrutiny that it...
No, that it deserves. Just to say
Yeah.
that. There's a lot of problems with the narrative.
Yeah.
But what was pulled off in that event was sort of a moral coup, because not only was Germany guilty, the entire Western Christian world was held guilty for that.
Yeah.
And I think that's expressed or exemplified in the fact that in the United States, every major city has a Holocaust museum.
Yeah. Well, and even I just remember as a young person, any time that we were instructed on World War II history, one of the underpinning lines that was constantly fed was America didn't do enough.
Yeah.
And therefore is somehow, maybe not as much as Germany, but it's still somehow morally guilty for its failure to stop the Holocaust.
Yeah. It became America's problem, America's guilt, and also became, particularly, one thing was the smearing of Pius XII.
Yeah, the Catholic Church was smeared. Even other Western European countries were smeared. They just this whole everybody who was a white, even nominally conservative Christian or Catholic was guilty.
Yeah,
no matter what role they played or didn't play.
Yeah. I was listening to Don Imus. Remember Don Imus?
Yeah, is he still around?
Yeah, no, but it was back in the 90s. I was just listening to going to work. It was on in the morning, and some guy called up, and then some guy says, "Yeah, and America did nothing about the Holocaust." And Don Imus's co-host goes, "Ever hear of D-Day?" No.
Yeah.
Which is a gross oversimplification, but I thought it was very funny. You ever hear of D-Day? But I mean that's what's happened, and now it's it's everyone, the guilt now is exploited to immunize them from any criticism. So.
Yeah, and it's so on one hand it's used that they're put into a place where any even mild criticism of, for instance, Jewish, explicitly Jewish influence on foreign policy or on the media is immediately dismissed as anti-Semitic, or you're starting to broach into Nazi territory. Mm-hmm. And then on the other hand, they use it to club not just the West, but even now the Muslim world as being somehow responsible for the Holocaust, being responsible for Hitler. For instance, in the case of the Palestinians, they drag up some old the former Mufti of Jerusalem, and somehow because he met with al-Husseini Amin al-Hajj al-Husseini, because he met with Hitler a few times, so somehow the Palestinians now are collectively Nazi collaborators and are responsible for what Hitler did, and these are things that are not just sort of fringe comments or arguments. This is stuff that's mainstream.
Yeah. There was a recent case where I think I did a show on the Irish Holocaust.
Yeah.
About the forced famine, by the way, in Ireland. People don't, it wasn't just a potato crop failure. The food was actually forcibly exported from Ireland. He was being lectured that Ireland does not have a memorial to the Holocaust.
Yeah.
And he says, maybe we'll get one when Israel has a memorial to the Irish Holocaust.
and I don't know why should the Irish have any? Whatever happened, the Irish had nothing to do with it. They were and they weren't even in any condition to act to do anything about it.
Exactly.
So why should they, take something that happened to a foreign people and make that the centerpiece of their society?
I mean, in that war, over 60 million people died in that war.
Yeah.
No one talks about the 3 million Bengalese who were starved to death by the British.
Yeah, and that's the thing. Nobody cares about what happened in other parts of the world. It all sort of fixates on this one thing, and presented in a certain way as if there's a certain metaphysical almost quality to it.
Yeah, it's become almost like a negative faith. They have to believe in evil.
Yeah.
It's been internalized by not only by Jews but by most people.
Gentiles,
actually. Because if you do express skepticism or some sort of disinquiry, you're immediately called a Nazi. I ran into that. Just here's a problem. Just pointing it out to somebody online, and he immediately starts accusing me of supporting, strength through joy trips. What are you talking about?
And that's the thing is
I'm just doing math here.
And whether it's the Holocaust or even now these gay rights and this stuff, they've set this sort of boundary lines that people will now police themselves from going over those boundaries.
Mm-hmm.
So you don't even need, some guy on CNN or on Fox to denounce you. You'll start pre-programming yourself not to question anything that goes beyond these preset boundaries.
Yeah.
I think, who was it? Tom Woods said the boundaries are between Mitt Romney and Hillary Clinton.
Yeah.
And anything outside of those boundaries, people are not going to question it.
Here's the thing, and I don't want to go off on a Holocaust revisionist thing, but
yeah, that's not my area.
Yeah, but the bottom line is that when you do alternative research, revisionist history, you realize you've been lied to about so much about the 20th century. Why do you believe the official organs were fully honest about that event?
Yeah.
So there's always room for skepticism.
Yeah, but the thing that stands out to me is not even necessarily the issue itself, which again I admit I don't have sufficient knowledge to offer any kind of informed opinion about, but it's the mere fact you're not allowed to talk about it.
In dozen countries they put you in jail.
Exactly. I mean, David Irving and several others, have done jail time.
Well, it wasn't that Canadian Ernst.
They deported
Zundel?
him. Zundel, yeah.
Ernst Zundel, where he's this artist, this German immigrant living in Canada, successful artist. He starts writing these pamphlets, and the best thing you just ignore them.
Yeah.
But the U.S. government, this is what makes me so suspicious about it. Of course, his house was burned down.
Yeah.
Then he's deported from Canada.
Well, he was deported from the U.S. first.
Yeah.
As I recall, he was married to an American woman or something.
Yeah.
Then they deported him to Canada, and then Canada.
Then they throw him in solitary confinement in Germany.
Yeah.
He didn't harm anybody.
Yeah. He just wrote some kind of wacky pamphlets or something.
Yeah, he has a point of view about something. And to me, who's someone who kind of imbibed the official narrative, or always kind of like interest in World War II, and I kind of accepted the main narrative, accepted what I was told much about the war. I see that. That's what makes me start to question it when I see people treated like that.
Yeah, because it becomes, why can't we talk about it?
Yes.
Why can't we ask? And again, I guess. Yes, with some of these issues, it does attract certain unsavory personalities, but so what? I know. For instance, when we come to homosexuality, the gay marriage thing, we're supposed to only think of the nice, made-for-TV gay couples, Modern Family or whatever. We're not supposed to think about the guys in San Francisco marching around nude and flashing their genitals in these gay pride parades. No, don't. But when it comes to
in front of children,
in front of children, in front of the public, and acting in the most lewd and disgusting manners. But when it comes to some of these controversial historical items, immediately they try to shut it down and associate it with, Stormfront or some other kind of, nasty outlet. And even Jewish critics or people like Norman Finkelstein have been punished and shunned for. He didn't even question the Holocaust.
No.
He just questioned why there's so many so-called survivors, and how that whole is just a big. He wrote a whole book on how the Holocaust industry, how that's a big money-making racket. And he's a Jewish man whose family actually suffered under National Socialism, but he was targeted, shunned, and I believe he lost his job at a university.
Yeah. And I read his book, and it's a well written, kind of a
scholarly
work, and it's there is a joke among the Jewish community. It says there's no business like show a business.
Yeah.
And I was there's a book written by Bernard Ginsberg called The Fatal Embrace: The Jews and the State, and he talked about in the 1950s there was a policy that the Jewish community had towards critics.
Yeah.
It was called something silence. Subtle silence or something. Basically, they would get the Jewish community to boycott any radio station or TV station, newspaper, which promoted or published alternative views regarding various, current events. And they'd say any right-winger promoting anti-Semitism, if their pamphlets or if their articles published or they're interviewed on a radio station, they would boycott that company.
Yeah.
And the question, of course, the obvious question is define anti-Semitic and define right-wing nut. Define these terms.
Yeah.
And who's to say if this boycott is silent? Who's to say it's restricted to nutters?
Yeah.
So.
But it's even spilled out into this. I mean, I'm now seeing Donald Trump of all people being accused of anti-Semitism, or sort of dog whistle anti-Semitism and all these kind of things.
Yeah.
Which is laughable, as he's whatever one thinks of Trump, he's certainly somebody who has been swimming in that New York Sea for a long time.
I know. Yeah.
I don't think he would be able to do that if he was some closet Stormfront type. But
I think his crime was he didn't take Jewish money.
He said he didn't want their money.
So
so he was anti-Semitic, and then some of his foreign policy positions were accused of being when he said he wanted to be fair between Israel and Palestine. He wanted to be in a position where he could really be fair to both sides. He was accused of anti-Semitism, not being supportive of Israel. And now, more recently, which is kind of funny to me, I'm sure you're familiar with David Horowitz, who runs, Front Page Mag? Mm-hmm. This kind of neoconservative, this really neoconservative outlet. But he came out and endorsed Trump and criticized Bill Kristol, the neocon godfather, and immediately the establishment conservative media jumped on David Horowitz of all people and started accusing him of anti-Semitism because he called Bill Kristol a wandering Jew for wanting to start some kind of third party run against Donald Trump. So it just shows you how this stuff ultimately starts entering into this absurd area where it's, once you push these kind of things along, they just take on this crazy, even monstrous type forms.
Yeah.
It's they kind of they get ahead of themselves. It's almost, I don't know, I find it, maybe I live in kind of an isolated bubble, but I find a lot of this stuff, crying anti-Semitism or racism or sexism or every these isms that people are now publicly denounced for. And it's ridiculous, some of the stuff you see. It's just into such an absurd area, and you just wonder, can it get any more crazier? And then it does.
But, we talk about destabilization, where it's occurred. Yeah. Obviously, we've talked about what's occurred in some of these other countries using soft power, using some of these, I guess, the cultural aggression, you could say, with imposition of sort of this gay rights, feminism into these traditional societies. Chris, I think we alluded to it in our earlier, what occurred here in the United States. One was, of course, with the Kinsey report promoting homosexuality, and this is sort of like, well, this is sort of setting the stage for the sexual revolution of the '60s.
Yeah.
I think also the introduction of the pill, that was a Rockefeller project as well.
Yeah.
Of course, you have in 1967, 66, I think you have the Griswold v. Connecticut decision, which overturns Connecticut's law banning the sale of contraception devices. Now, this sets the stage for Roe v. Wade 6-7 years later. The importance of that decision, also based on very dubious interpretation of the Constitution, right to privacy, 14th Amendment, which also Roe v. Wade was based on a few years later, rather dubiously as well, it wasn't, again, it sold us as liberty. But the thing is, the goal there wasn't so much letting people obtain contraception, which they could anyway. It's to clear the way so the government could promote it in the schools.
Yeah. And via state funding for Planned Parenthood and
all that opened up for that. Yeah. And of course, Planned Parenthood in 1969, I believe, had a conference where they stated that one of their objectives was to promote homosexuality.
Yeah.
For the purposes of population control.
Yeah. It's just like out of that was an Anthony Burgess novel, The Wanting Seed, I think. The author of The Clockwork Orange.
Yeah.
He actually wrote a fictional book about that, where the state deliberately promotes homosexuality and kind of demonized heterosexuality as a means of population control. Mm-hmm. And it seems increasingly like we're living in that world.
And of course, this is also at the same time, that same year you have the famed Stonewall riots.
Yes. Yeah.
Which is promoted as this great, coming out event for organized homosexuality. And at the same time, you have this big push in the homosexual community to lower the consent laws.
Yeah. And you had, and you've had this big shift though in it, how like initially the homosexuals presented themselves, we just want to be left alone. We just want to be left alone, which on a surface level appeals to people. Okay. Yeah. Just leave them alone. Yeah. Let them do in private what they want to do like anyone else. But it didn't stop there. And now it's to the point where if you aren't insufficiently enthusiastic about homosexuality, you're a homophobe and you're some kind of bigot, and you have to be constant. It's almost as if homosexuality has become the sort of public civic religion that you have to bow down and give your daily praise to it. Mm-hmm.
It's almost like it's sodomy. It's that's the holy act.
And now they've brought out the transgender item, and that's again I don't understand, because you have so-called transgenders make up a percent of the population, but yet it's thrust right into the public domain as if they're the most important group within society now. And you have to, with the Caitlyn Jenner thing being the catalyst for a lot of that. Another thing that I'm convinced was some kind of psyop. Mm-hmm. And now it's all, every time now I go to check the news, the Western news in the United States, Canada, Western Europe, it's all about transgenders now. Everything is all about oriented towards elevating them in society, and it's again, it's one of these top-down type things. And as you pointed out a few minutes ago about North Carolina being bludgeoned by the rest, not just by the United States, but by the rest of the world, or the so-called international community for some minor bathroom laws.
For having a law that says that you should... I was listening to a news report. I don't listen to much terrestrial radio anymore, but I'm trying to get the weather, so I'm forced to listen to updates. Headlines, and it says North Carolina is passing a law that would restrict the use of bathrooms based on your biological sex.
Yeah.
What else should I'm thinking to myself, okay, what you identify as? I'm going to use. You could use that. I'm going to use that excuse to waltz into a woman's locker room.
Yeah.
Well, I feel like a woman today. I'm sorry.
Yeah. And we recently had Obama come out and tell states that if they want to keep getting federal funding for schools, they have to adopt this very liberal transgender bathroom / locker room policy.
Which is a completely, no surprise. They're using Title 9 or 10 funding, and now they're construing sexual discrimination as discriminating against people who have gender identity or changing the language of the law, which no surprise there. But do you think they would have passed the Civil Rights Act or would have passed Title 9 or 10 if you were told someone back in 1972? I think that's when it was passed. Yeah. This can apply to people who identify as women.
And that they can share the bathroom with your daughter or your son, and so some big gross hairy guy with a big beard, he says he's a woman. Yeah. So he can go into the bathroom with one of your little girls in there, essentially. Mm-hmm. I mean, if we want to, strip away the kind of the fluff that's put around it, and that's the reality.
And when he gets killed by the father, it'll be some class celeb like Matthew Shepard.
Yeah, which again was another fake narrative. Yeah. And the other one is now in Canada. The Canadian Prime Minister Trudeau, I think that's his name, Justin Trudeau, is also trying to strengthen Canada's so-called hate speech laws to be used against those who, what do they say, propagandize against transgenderism. But on the other hand, if you remember, I don't know, maybe 2 or 3 years ago, Russia was punished by the respectable international community for passing laws that forbade homosexual propaganda to minors. It didn't in any way attack homosexuals as such. It just said that they could not propagandize to minors, and Russia was demonized quite intensely by that in the Western media, and it's just. But again, Saudi Arabia, where homosexuals are beheaded and stoned and hung and all this kind of stuff, nobody has too much to say about that.
No, it's all selective, and it's interesting because, again, you can't talk about tolerance. You can't teach tolerance about these things to children without violating the children's innocence. Yeah. These topics should not even be broached with children. Yeah. So when you have gay scoutmasters, don't why is that even being brought up? Yeah. The fact that you brought it up means you're disqualifying yourself. Why would a parent have a problem with a out of the closet homosexual taking their kids on a camping trip? Yeah. But that's intolerant. Yeah. But it's selectively selective tolerance, because again, if you come back, for instance, in Europe now, they're bringing in a lot of these Muslim refugees, and I've seen the increase of stories of, for instance, violent attacks against homosexuals and transsexuals in Germany, and we can't really talk about that because it's only matters if there's a white male involved. So if we can't demonize a white male in it, we don't really care about the tolerance issue. Yeah, it's like when the Trayvon Martin shooting occurred. Yeah, tried to pass the make white. Yeah. So, the white Mexican. He had a German last name, but he threw a lot of people off for a second. Yeah, didn't fit the narrative. They just sort of use this very fluid how they do with a lot of this stuff. But what we're seeing here in the United States is, again, this is after some 50, 60 years of psychological warfare that's destroyed the family, disrupted communities. You had the sexual revolution. Now, the sexual revolution itself could not have occurred if not for, arguably if not for the creation of suburbia, which was a social engineering scheme concocted by the foundations and the War Department. Because if you have these ethnic neighborhoods where people are still identify as Catholic, Irish Catholic, Italian Catholic, German Catholic, Polish Catholic, they identify with their parish and their community, and the idea was to force them out of the cities through well, they threatened them with racial integration, destroyed the ethnic, makeup of the neighborhoods. They moved out to the suburbs, and they became sort of this bland white middle class.
Yeah.
Which then could be subjected to all the psychological warfare that Hollywood and Madison Avenue has to offer them.
Yeah, and once people are kind of rootless and cosmopolitan, it makes it easier to influence them and attack them in these negative ways. They're not attached to anything concrete that they might be able to hold on to against these kind of waves coming at them. So since they don't have that grounding, it's just easy to sort of, push them around and push them over and see themselves as nothing more than just, interchangeable consumers.
Yeah, then, of course, consumers is a big thing, and that goes back to what Edward Bernays was doing, Sigmund Freud's nephew.
Yeah.
Double nephew.
Yeah.
How that works out. But his idea goes, because he did it, he too did it with promoting sexual permissiveness with, was it Damaged Goods and Nijinsky, the dancer, or the guy who would like masturbate on stage or something, or mimic it or something.
Yeah.
And this type of strategy would perdure throughout the 20th century with entertainment, with Hollywood, once they cracked the production code in the 60s, and that's largely was a function of the weakening of the Catholic Church in the United States, which was a function of breaking apart the ethnic neighborhoods and creating suburbia.
Yeah.
So by the 60s, they could, within 7 years of the production code collapsing, you had 3 porn films being, major films being put into, first-run theaters.
Yeah.
So it was no longer segregated to the
back alleys.
The back alley, seedy part of town.
Yeah.
Of course, with the internet, with the what was it, the Communication Decency Act, which really should be the Indecency Act.
Yeah.
With the internet, they really, now it's like no holds barred because
there's no filters. Yeah.
There's no filters.
Yeah. So it's beamed. It's as soon as it's uploaded, it's beamed around not just the United States but around the rest of the world. Within minutes. Yeah. So all this stuff, internet pornography and things of this nature, that's now a global phenomenon.
Mm-hmm.
And I guess we're going to have to see in the next decade or two how that kind of breakdown starts affecting more traditional societies in Asia and Africa.
And this is how it's almost like when I became familiar with the authoritarian personality and who published it. It was consistent with the efforts of the CIA through Time Life promoting teenage pregnancy with Life magazine, promoting sexual revolution, promoting feminism. Is if you disrupt people's communities, their families, you create family instability, you create people that are vulnerable to these things, to be manipulated, turned into consumers, and you create a whole generations of children that are damaged goods.
Yeah.
And which in a way will increase the amounts of maybe of transgendered, confused, homosexual people in the population in general, because that many more people are going to have dysfunctional families.
Yeah.
Absent fathers and.
Yeah, the broken. But the irony, at least to me, is, in terms of something like the authoritarian personality, is this is a book that I think Theodor Adorno, who's one of the co-writers, right?
Yeah.
These are the guys that were supposedly critics of capitalism, but everything they helped do, breaking down the family, pushing the sexual revolution, has strengthened the capitalist system. So it's a bit of an irony how the Frankfurt School, Adorno, Marcuse, etc., how everything that they did only strengthened a system that they claimed to be trying to undermine.
Yeah.
But it wasn't. But the thing is, it wasn't capitalism per se that they were undermining. It was these pre-existing traditional institutions which actually stood in the way of so-called pure capitalism.
Yeah. Well, that's the importance of these institutions, the mediating institutions, whether it's church, family, extended family, communities. These are buffers between the individual and the corporate state, and we have to mention it's the corporate state.
Yeah.
Because without these institutions, we're just individuals, we're atomized individuals that can be manipulated, as opposed to having family, community, religion, rootedness, and gives us something to fall back on, and which is the ultimate goal. I think is because you could say the ultimate revolution is to destroy these institutions and create this this global the world state. The world state.
Yeah.
And
everything that's happening is we tend to think, okay, transgender bathrooms in North Carolina and the war on Syria, these things are related in this sense. I mean, they're different means serving the same purposes.
Yeah.
One is breaking down the American people, one is breaking down the Russian people, one is breaking down the Syrian people, destroying their rootedness, destroying their identity, their religious and cultural and family institutions, break all those down. A sort of cultural atom bomb, and just demolish this, and then the next step can happen. The next thing can be built on top of the ruins of these destroyed societies. These, with all now that everyone is atomized, everyone's a rootless consumer, just waiting to buy the next iPhone, and where religion is just something you do on Sunday, if at all. But it doesn't have any kind of deeper rooted, nature to it. It doesn't have any substance to it. It's just religion now in the West is just another consumer item.
Well, I think that's what the experience that Hollywood had in the 30s when the Catholics imposed the production. It was largely a Catholic operation. On Hollywood's moguls, and they said, if you produce these films, we're not going to see them. And a bishop could say that, and the Catholics in that community would not go to the movies. They don't want that type of opposition.
Yeah. But now, it'd be nice to see a bishop say that now.
I know, exactly. Bishop, I think it was Doherty in Philadelphia who told Jack Warner that, pretty much read him the Riot Act. And because people don't realize his films in the late 20s were rather racy. I was watching a YouTube. There's like a nude scene in a Tarzan film that they had to cut out. And so so Hollywood kind of had to control itself for a while. And some of this production stuff people kind of laugh at. But considering what the corrosive effect that the movie industry's had on society in general, people shouldn't be laughing at it.
No.
Because it really has been damaging.
But it goes to show how much the power of the Catholic Church has declined. In the past several decades.
And a lot of that was demographic. The baby boom was a Catholic thing. And they elected a Catholic president. And
but now I'm saying you'd be hard pressed to find a bishop who would even be willing to say that, much less have anyone respect his position on that.
But they're too busy warding off lawsuits because of
or pushing for trying to get more immigration or something.
And so there's no. But again, that's one of these things where you have these these mediating institutions that a true free society must have, instead of whether it's radical individualism or socialism. Is these I guess you could say these civil society, right? Civil society, is what makes life worth living. It's what creates a community. So
but now they want us to think the things that make life worth living are Facebook and Sex and the City or whatever the latest sexualized drama is. That's what life is all about. Watching the NFL on Sunday after with your Budweiser.
Well, that's what's you work all the week for the weekend. So you can veg out in front of the TV set.
That's the real focus of society now is the TV or its computerized equivalent.
And so
it works perfectly as as sort of this, you know, you have all the atomized population, these radical individuals. Everyone's just this individual consumer, and that's the one thing that gives, you know, they can all rally around is whatever's on TV.
Well, it's breads and circuses. And,
yeah.
Yeah, like you said, you mentioned that what contempt the NFL must have for their fan base,
Yeah.
but it reminds me of the contempt that the Roman emperors had for the people in the Colosseum. You know?
Yeah, they just see them as cattle, essentially. And they say as much. I mean, guys like Mark Zuckerberg, you know, he called his users dumb mother effers and stuff like that. I mean, that's the level of respect they have for the people who consume their products.
Yeah, and who supply all their information data to Facebook.
Yeah,
you know,
which is the NSA.
Yes. Mm-hmm. So, well, Dan, listen, I want to thank you for coming on the show.
Well, thank you for having me.
Any other observations? Anything else?
I don't know. It's just, I'm watching the American election, see how that goes. It's certainly, as far as the Republican end of it went, it was certainly a amusing ride.
Yes.
So we'll see where it goes
Donald
from here.
Trump. I never would have guessed Donald Trump was nominated a year ago.
I'm not expecting too much, but still, so see what happens.
So especially what happens to the convention.
They try to cheat him or not.
Pull something, create like a brokered convention, and all of a sudden we have Jeb Bush as the nominee.
I did love Trump's roasts of Jeb. Those were pretty good.
Yeah. So, well, listen, Dan, great. Thanks for coming on the show. Any projects coming up soon, or?
Nothing specific. Just my routine writing at Soul of the East. That's probably where you can find, you know, my regular writings. I write about once a month. I have something up, so probably in the next few weeks I'll have something.
Oh, good. Okay. I think the last posting I had one in April.
Yeah, I think so. I had a little bit of a slump there for a while. I had some other personal issues to attend to.
You mean you have a job? You have an actual job?
Yeah, I have a job and a life. Yeah, I don't just sit on the internet all day.
You're right. You're teaching a career, right?
Yes, that's correct. Yeah.
I see. So is this like a long-term thing for you? You plan to return to the West anytime soon?
Still kind of up in the air right now. See how things go. I don't know. I might get. I don't know if I can use the right bathroom if I go back home.
I know you might walk. Well, you can always just switch your identity.
Yeah.
So great. So okay, well, Dan, great. I'll let you go.
All right.
Enjoy the rest of your day. There. It's late morning, right?
Yeah, it's almost 11 a.m.
So great.
Yeah.
Okay, well, enjoy your weekend. And,
all right. Thank you.
Maybe we'll talk again soon, and I'll have to catch your latest offerings on Boiler Room.
Yeah, thank you.
Great. So.
All right.
Okay, great. Good night then. Thanks.
Right.
Or good
night.
Morning.
All right. Yeah. Good night.
Bye-bye.
Bye.
This is JJ Inc. from Against the Wall.